Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Justin Nault. He's a nutritional therapist, founder of Clovis and personal evolution coaching, specializing in healing metabolisms and helping people break free from the toxic grips of diet culture. With a unique approach that blends nutrition, psychology, and spirituality, Justin empowers his clients to embrace self love and achieve lasting, profound transformations. So, this is my very brief introduction of you, Justin. The full bio will be at the end of this video. The question that I love asking my guests is, how would you describe who you are in this very moment? I know I just gave some technical information, but who is Justin here and now in this moment?
Well, when I think of the way that I am of service currently, I think of myself as a confidence pill.
Ha. Confidence, Bill. I never heard it that way. That's unique.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why confidence? Why is that concept, that word?
Because I actually think that the epidemic of chronic disease that we have, particularly in America,
Yeah.
the epidemic of chronic disease, obesity, depression, anxiety, these mental health conditions, it all comes down to programming around self-worth.
Right.
So I think that especially in the land of social media, where everyone is comparing their worst to everyone else's best, what they see on screen, there's this really toxic comparison culture that I think makes people freeze up and think, there's no way I can do what that guy does. There's no way. Like, look at Justin. He has followers. He can do this thing.
Yeah.
So I try to help people see in themselves what I inherently see in all people, which is that you are the one. This is your reality. You're Neo in the Matrix in your story.
Yeah.
So I try to listen with empathy and ask the right questions to help people understand that they can do whatever they want to do in this video game of life.
Yeah. How wonderful, though. It sounds very spiritual to me, this idea of embracing our uniqueness and seeing ourselves as life itself, flowing with life, like dancing with all this without pushing anything away. That's one of my biggest practices.
Hmm.
Is that is that a spiritual understanding that you have, a spiritual view of yourself in the world, or more of a psychological approach?
I think psychology is spirituality and vice versa, right? I believe the tenet that I live by is everything,
Yeah.
right? I've never experienced a person, place, or thing that doesn't exist in my consciousness, right? So by me being here playing this 3D game that I call human, everything that I do is inherently spiritual. So yeah, I think I would say it's a spiritual perspective. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Right. It's fascinating how the mind automatically creates separation, right? And
Mm.
it wants to know, it wants to distinguish everything. I have heard about discernment that's quite different from distinguishing, separating things, and trying to analyze everything as a separate entity or parts.
Yeah. Well, there's decisiveness,
Yeah.
there's duality, and there's division, right? All those things kind of fall into the same category for me.
Yeah.
So I live my life, my everyday state of consciousness is an awareness of non-duality, playing the game of duality, right?
Yeah.
So if we say source or one or everything or God, whatever you want to call this thing, it can't actually exist in a state of non-duality because nothing exists without relativity,
Right.
right? There's no light without dark. There's no you without me. So for me to self-actualize further and expand my consciousness as the one, I have to create duality so I can learn lessons from the mirror. This is me talking to a mirror here,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And we're all just sort of playing this game with one another. And for that game of duality to work, we have to forget non-duality and exist here in this realm. So you can have an awareness and a theoretical understanding of non-duality, but you can't actually exist in non-duality because you'll just walk around and bump into walls.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see how the mind gets in the way. It's incredible. Like with the idea of health and wellness, looking in a certain way, being healthy and all that. at some point, I just had to give up all that and just flow with life. Whatever direction it is, that's science. I married somebody who is very much into going to the gym and working out and all that. So that's a sign for me. So I kind of follow that and I go with him and we'd go to the gym and all. But there's not really anything in me that's saying I have to look or be in a certain way in order to accept myself or love myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's out of the picture. But I know it's not the reality for a lot of people. So talk to me for a moment from that perspective. When did you see that, this movement of shifting from trying to be and to look in a certain way to just letting life be what it is and being one with life in that sense?
Yeah, the hardest thing for me, I was a quote unquote fat kid growing up, and I had terrible body dysmorphia because I was watching Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and all these action movies. Because I was born in '86, I'm 38 years
Yeah.
old now,
Yeah.
so I grew up with these like action bodybuilder megastars that gave me body dysmorphia. And then later in life, and through running Clovis and working with thousands of people, I've seen the same thing. I always tell moms this, where I'm like, your children are going to do a really bad job doing what you tell them, and they're going to do a
Yeah.
really good job becoming you. So I started running into all these women coming to me with the same story. My mother was a lovely person. She loved me and she told me how beautiful I was and told me not to worry about my body. Like, there were other women who said my mom called me fat when I was a kid, and that's its own childhood trauma.
Yeah.
But even the sweetest moms, and then these women are coming to me, they've been overweight for 30 years. And I'm like, okay, that's what your mom told you. When was the first time you saw your mom weighing herself or counting calories or trying to squeeze into her skinny jeans? And they're like, oh, my entire life. My mom was on Weight Watchers from the time I was 5 years old. And so now they're just emulating their mom, right? So it's always this, it's programming. It's the same thing in our search for truth, right? To get to your own subjective truth eventually, you have to weave your way in and out of and through everyone else's subjective truth. So we have this
Right.
programming layered on top of us. So most of the time when women are, between the ages of 35 and 55 coming to me, they have a lifetime of self-loathing, hating their body, wanting their body to be different, and feeling like their body is betraying them. So their intuition is gone because they're not connected to their body at all. So it becomes just like starvation, sacrifice, punishment in the gym because you hate it and you're running on the treadmill and nothing's changing. But then somehow, some way, the weekend comes or the nighttime comes and you're mad at yourself because you binge ate a whole pint of ice cream. It's this really toxic mess that is a lack of self-love, and real like sort of self-loathing that's built from other people's conditioning and programming that was put upon you.
Right. That's true. I guess most of us we're not comfortable with truth, right?
Yeah.
I noticed that with the people around me, my family members. And that's why I started this podcast because, gosh, I got to find people that we can just talk about anything,
Yeah.
and no problem. So, yeah, how do you feel about that? Are we really, is this something that, is my observation really accurate?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason why people are uncomfortable with truth is because truth historically is weaponized. Truth is the reason for all wars. Right? So we
Yes.
have an idea that objective truth exists, right? So if we look at something like Christianity, there are 45,000 Christian denominations. And every single one thinks my way are the true words of Jesus. Our way is correct. The other 44,999 of you, you're all wrong. Our
Right.
way is the one way. And we're all basing it on the same person, the same words, quote unquote, that were spoken, right? So the reason why truth is scary is because we live in a society where when you tell someone you disagree with their truth, they're attaching their truth to their identity. You've now attacked their identity as a person, right?
Yes.
So I'm in the land of alternative health and wellness. And I think the evidence-based scientific community has been destructive to health and wellness in America. So very regularly I'll have, a PhD with some million followers online that will attack me. And I never respond to it because I'm in a world where he or her got their credentials from a perceived authority that I don't believe in.
Right.
So they're very proud of their identity. I am a PhD. How dare you disagree with me? I say, those letters behind your name don't actually mean anything to me. I think you're part of a marketing funnel that has programmed you to sell drugs. So we don't actually have anything to talk about anymore. And I'm not judging. I'm like, hey, I love you. I'm giving you nothing but love. I respect you as a person. You're probably great. We would be friends if we weren't having this conversation where we disagree with one another.
Yeah.
I have no ill will towards you, but they get very upset because their credentials are their truth. Their truth is their identity, and they're willing to fight me over it.
Wow.
So this is why people are so afraid of truth, because the truth in today's society gets you attacked immediately if it is at odds with someone else's truth, both of whom believe their truth is the objective truth, which therein lies the problem.
Yes. So when it comes to this idea of changing the world and trying to, I hear that a lot. I remember saying that I want to make the world a better place. Is that something that we are doing for ourselves? We're trying to create this reality that's very comfortable and, it feels good to be around peaceful people and all that. Or this is a divine intelligence kind of working through us. I,
Yeah.
I often wonder what's happening.
We are, it seems to me, right? My subjective truth here is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, which means we're choosing to be in a human experience for
Right.
what the human experience can teach us. And what a lot of people in New Age spirituality start doing is trying very hard to escape the human experience. I want to transcend. I want to transcend to the 5D and go beyond this human body. And
Yeah.
listen, I'm that guy too. Like, you can find me doing things like dry fasting, no food, no water, in isolation in the wilderness, and taking psychedelic mushrooms. Like, I have done all of these things. I understand. There's a draw to that. It's very attractive to me. But I understand, I always understand, even when I'm in those states of altered consciousness, the plan is that I always come back here in this little meat suit, and I got to drink water, and I have to eat food, and I have to do all of these things. So if we can understand that we are these spiritual beings having a human experience, the human experience becomes a lot more fun.
Right.
And I call it the video game of life. When people are in a video game and they go down the quote unquote wrong turn and they meet the boss and they die in the video game and then they come back and they start over, they don't have an emotional response to that. People are frozen in society today because everyone wants to make the right decision. And they have been taught since childhood that wrong decisions have very dire consequences.
Right.
I don't believe in good, bad, right, wrong. That's problematic for a lot of people that think there is the light and the dark, and the lightness must overcome the dark, and blah, blah. It's like, if you go back to theology throughout all the time, all these religions, it's like, if God is the most powerful being in all of creation, in all of existence, then why does he not just destroy the devil? And the answer is because the devil is him.
Yeah.
It's one and the same. So the destruction of the devil becomes destruction of God. And you're in this game where there is no good, bad, right, wrong. It's all just playing a role in the theater that is. And again, relativity, if there's no light, we don't know darkness. If there's no darkness, we don't know light. So what I try to help people see is that in the video game of life, there are actions, there are consequences for those actions. If you take the action of only eating single ingredient, nutrient dense foods for the next year, there will be consequences and your life will look a certain way at the end of that year. If in the same year you eat nothing but McDonald's 3 times a day, at the end of that year, there will be consequences for those actions. Your body and your health will be in a particular state that is not good or bad or right or wrong. It is just your step on the journey. So I'm able to work with clients, and then clients come to me very disappointed on calls. Justin, you're going to be so upset with me. I fell off the wagon. I went out with my girlfriends and I had wine and I ate the bread, and they're just tearing themselves up. And I'm like, so what are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do the next meal? Well, that just did so bad. I ruined everything. Did you? This is an infinite game we're playing, right?
Yeah.
Take the pressure off.
Yes. Wow. I didn't expect this. That's beautiful. I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
You didn't mention anything about non-duality. Oh my God.
These are your questions and they're great. I'm happy to go wherever you want to.
That's amazing. Within the approach, your approach as a coach, you bring the concept of self-love a lot. And for some people, it still feels abstract or something that's not easy to do. So how would you describe the embodiment of self-love? What does it look like?
Yeah, self-love is a skill. I believe that we come into this life with self-love because we don't have an understanding of other. It's like when you're a child, the world actually does revolve around you in your mind. You're like,
Yeah.
I scream and these creatures come and they give me food and these things happen. Like, the world really does revolve around us, right? But over time, we're taught, especially in public school, sit down, be quiet. You can't go anywhere without raising your hand. Your autonomy is stripped from you, you know? So we end up in this situation where we have to find
Yes.
the awareness that love is an internal game. Because what we end up doing, because of that stand up, sit down, raise your hand, good girl, bad girl, good boy, good girl, A plus, F, right? We're constantly seeking external validation. As a child, if we lose love, we die.
Mm.
So the loss of love feels like a life or death game in our nervous system for the rest of our lives. So you have people that grow up and they're so afraid that if they act a certain way or they make the wrong decision or they express themselves in a way that's not accepted, they're going to lose love and it feels like they're going to die. So they're seeking love from everybody else, which is what I call other esteem, not self-esteem.
Right.
Self-esteem is an internal game, right? It's not, do you love yourself? For me, I was in the music industry for 15 years. I had a reality TV show when I was 25, all this stuff, right? Do I love myself when I'm this fantastic performer on stage and everyone says I'm loving that I'm amazing? Okay, great. How do I feel when I'm lazy and don't want to get off the couch and I haven't accomplished anything, quote unquote, in the last week? Do I still love myself then? So when I realize my love of self is conditional,
Right.
now I got to work on that. And this is no different than if someone comes to me and they say, Justin, I want big biceps. I say, okay, you got to go to the gym. As you know, as a competitor, you got to do some bicep curls. So if 90 days later, they say, Justin, my biceps haven't grown. And I say, did you go do bicep curls? And they say, no. Well, okay, right? So the first thing that people get to me, they come to me for weight loss. The first exercise I give them is called daily mirror work. And they stand in the mirror. They eye gaze with themselves. They say, I love you 10 times and mean it. The next is 5 statements. I'm proud of you for. You got to name 5 different things. Then the next 5 statements, I forgive you for. 5 separate things. And the last one, I commit to you that. 5 separate things. So we're doing self-love. I'm proud of you for. I forgive you for. And I commit to you that. And I have these people stand in these mirrors and do this. And many, many people are either so uncomfortable they can't get through the exercise at first, or their face gets red and they're embarrassed. And then I have to point out to them, you know, you're alone in a room with no observers.
Yes.
So if you're embarrassed, who's judging who? Right? So as I work them through this, they start to get better and better at it and increase their self-love. We have other exercises as well, different meditations that I do for people. Eventually, I help them see this is the kindergarten level of this game. And the PhD level is every single human in your existence is also a mirror. So here we're literally speaking into the mirror and giving unconditional love and acceptance. Now, when we go out into the world and we meet a total stranger and we don't really like their clothes or their hair and how dare she wear those pants in public, and we can become beings that are full of unconditional love for that person and accepting them where they are, now the game starts to change. So this video game of life, again, in my subjective reality and what has worked really well for me to build the life of my dreams, is this entire thing is a reflexive holosphere. And it is mirroring back to me my internal state at all times. Wow. Which takes us back to the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yes. That's a very interesting, fascinating concept, which is it's not abstract to me, but it is to some people. How do you explain the collective reality? What's happening now? You see the wars and all this political turmoil. Is that reflecting our collective consciousness? Because there's just one consciousness, not two. Yeah, I'm wondering, how is that reflecting my inner reality when it feels like quite the opposite?
Yes. Well, and this is the hard part. This is where we get into like Jungian depth psychology of like ego versus shadow. Once we start to expose our shadows and the things that exist within the archetypes of self, we'll understand, again, if there is no good, bad, right, wrong,
Yeah.
I'm creating all of that, right? From my own perspective. I'm not saying this is truth. To anyone listening to this, you can hear the way that I view reality, and you can, like an eye doctor, what about this lens? What about this lens? You can try my lens on and you can see if your world gets better. But I use the example of social media. There was a comedian who went on YouTube, and for 2 weeks, all he did was click videos of puppies. Before you know it, 2 weeks later, the only thing that exists in his social media reality tunnel is puppies, 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 puppies. There's no war, there's no death, there's no murder, there's no this, there's no that. So you have to ask the question, do these things exist if you don't pay attention to them? In one of my favorite books of all time, Reality Transurfing, he describes them as pendulums that we're giving our attention to, right?
Right.
So, and people will try to tell me all the time, oh, you don't vote? How irresponsible. Don't you know there are starving children in Africa? Don't you know this, that? I'm like, I know that if I dedicate my life to starving children in Africa, and that's the one thing that I work towards for the rest of my life, I'm going to find a whole lot of evidence of children starving in Africa, and I can fly over there and I can meet them and I can give them food and I can give them money and I can work at this thing. I'm never going to solve the problem because it's a problem that I'm perpetuating for myself, right? So the question becomes, what people don't want to face is all of the quote unquote ugliness that they see in the world is a direct reflection of the things they're not willing to look at within themselves. It's the same way when someone pulls up to a traffic light and there are a bunch of homeless people there in ratty clothes begging for change. What do people do? They try to look straight ahead. Don't make eye contact.
Yeah.
I don't want to look at this thing, right? It's the parts of self that we're uncomfortable with. So the same way that we have to say, so many people love to say social media is so toxic and it's toxic for our brains and it's poisoning us. And oh, they're trying to put all this junk in our face all the time. Some other monstrous person is putting this stuff in my eyeballs. But the truth is, it's there because you're clicking it. It's there because you're feeding the algorithm. The algorithm knows what you slow down and look at, not even just the things that you like. It knows when you stop scrolling.
Yeah.
And if you stop scrolling on nothing but puppies, you're going to have a delightful puppy experience on social media. In life, if you can put your focus and attention into love, into wonderful stories, it's the greatest time to be alive ever. It's the safest time to be alive. It's the most abundant time to be alive. It's unbelievable. The poorest people today have wealth beyond the wildest dreams of kings and queens living 100 years ago.
Yeah, true.
But we insist, look at how horrible everything is, you know? But all that, and if we talk about the collective conscious, I can't change the collective conscious, but I can change me.
Yeah.
And if every single one of us is saying, I can change me, well, then there's 8 billion of us that are going, I can change me. I can make my TikTok algorithm puppies. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when everyone's seeing puppies all day, everyone's being nicer to each other in traffic and shaking hands and giving hugs, and the whole world changes. But it's an inside job.
Yes. So I think I learned that, Justin, somehow not to push anything away. And now it doesn't matter if whatever I watch, whatever I see, it just doesn't change anything. And that is a practice, an interesting practice, just seeing the difference between mind and consciousness. They all here, but we need to be able to discern.
I mean, there's a lot of directions I could go in that, right? Because if we think about where you started, where it's like I try to, or initially you were trying to like only see beautiful things, and I focus on the good and all the things.
Oh, yeah.
That's great, amazing. But you're going to see something eventually that's uncomfortable for you, and this is where like some of what I'm about to say will make people uncomfortable. It's like, I do a lot of masculinity work. I work with men in relationship. I have a program called King versus Prince, where I'm trying to bring people from their prince energy into their king energy, and you'll end up with someone. Let's say somebody has a pornography addiction that they're hiding from their partner or something like that. It's because of the tremendous shame and guilt and keeping that in the shadow. And when they were a child, they know, if I do this, I'm going to get in trouble by mommy. So they hide it, shame, guilt. Then they're in a romantic relationship with another consenting adult, and it's still hide, shame, guilt. Then they get caught and, oh, no, excuse is this. It's like, no, yeah, you know what? Actually, I really like this act. This feels really good to me. I don't know if it's great for me, but this is a thing that I'm doing. And I think that if I stop shaming myself for this, and all of a sudden that draw, the magnetism to the sneaky, shady, shadowy thing goes away. And you can just say, you know what? Yeah, I used to really enjoy porn, but I don't really think that it's serving me anymore. So I've made a conscious decision. By the way, if you have feelings about my porn use, I'm here for your emotions, but this is for me to sort out. You're not my mom. You're not in charge of me. We have agreements in our relationship. And if you need to make agreements, if you need to leave the relationship because of I like this thing, then that's a conversation that we have to have.
Right.
But standing in your own energy without shame, without judgment, which is the same reason I've done a lot of work with people who have healed tremendous trauma through sexual expression, through BDSM, through kink, through all of these different things. There's a lot of ways to heal and process. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you went into, an evangelical Christian church and say, hey, I healed my trauma by going to BDSM sex parties, they'd be like, oh my, how dare you, right?
Yes, so it's like, dare you?
What is beautiful? What is dark? What is correct? What is not? What is right, wrong? It's all subjective. There are a million paths to this healing game that we're playing.
Yes, I think it's really a movement from fear to love, isn't it, Justin? Now you're not afraid of anything. Yes. You're not afraid of yourself. You can't be afraid of any parts of this self, which is whole. So yes, that's a beautiful practice, though, to be able to
Mm.
do that. It takes a lot of courage, though. It really does, to be able to look at things that you used not to be used to, as in my case.
Yeah.
So, yeah, talk to me about specifically. I see that healing our metabolism is a
Mm.
huge thing. So I wanted to ask you that question. Become just shifting a little bit from spirituality to practicality.
Mhm.
So talk to me about the concept of healing our metabolism.
Sure. Yeah. So the easiest way for me to put it forward is I say food versus poison, right?
Yeah.
So we've heard you were in fitness competitions. So you hear the evidence-based people, nutritionists, trainers, calories in, calories out, energy in, energy out. It's all about energy balance, thermodynamics, this, that. But we teach people energy in, energy out. But the reality is it's like gasoline in a car. Gasoline is not energy. It is potential energy. Once there is a reaction that takes place and a flame or a spark, then it creates energy. Food is just potential energy. Metabolism, this word we use, metabolism, is anything happening within the body serving the purpose of taking food, potential energy, and creating ATP, actual energy that is usable by the body. So because of
Yeah.
diet culture, we had food companies in the 1950s come in and flood the market with toxic poison, junk food. That became the normal. The American diet right now is over 70% ultra processed foods. So people are eating a bunch of poison that's breaking their metabolic function. It's making it harder for them to turn food into energy. So we now have this situation where we have epidemics like sarcopenic obesity, which is an individual who is clinically obese, over 30 pounds overweight, with very low skeletal muscle mass and osteoporosis. Their bones and muscles are disintegrating. And we're telling them to eat less food, which is a death sentence. They need more nourishment. They need
Right.
more nutrient dense foods. They need vitamins and minerals. We have to actually nourish the body instead of starving them. So we've gone in this terrible direction where we've fed the entire society a whole bunch of toxic poison. And then when they get sick or overweight or get cancer, we blame them. It's your fault. You should just eat less, move more, eat less, move more. And we also know that term that I used, ATP, if we keep it simple and just say ATP is energy in the body, we know from scientific studies that depressed and anxious subjects generate about an average of 20% less ATP than non-depressed and anxious subjects. So we need people to create more energy in their body, which means we need to remove all the things that are damaging metabolic function and making a dysfunctional metabolism.
Right.
So it's quite simple when I tell it on its face. People come into my programs, I say, we remove poison, we eat single ingredient, whole foods, we go for walks for 10 minutes here and there, we get sunshine on our skin, and we sleep well. It seems very, very simple on its face, you
Yeah,
know?
it does. Yeah.
But then people come in, and most of my coaching is trying to figure out why I give them a blueprint for perfect health, and they just can't do it. Yeah, but I keep stopping at Chick-fil-A on the way home and eating the fried chicken or getting the milkshake or whatever. And that's when I have to tease apart the self-love part and say, listen, if you really love yourself, if you're centered in your own love of self, then this program doesn't become, oh, I'm so upset I can no longer eat the fried chicken at Chick-fil-A. My nutritional therapist, Justin, took away my favorite thing. This sucks. Woe is me,
Yes.
blah, blah, blah. But
Yes.
instead, you look and you say, oh, that's poison. If I love myself, I would never knowingly ingest poison. And once that happens, I always tell people that health and wellness is a light switch decision. You make the decision on a dime. I'm now a healthy person, and I live through the lens of a healthy person. So it's a light switch decision that happens in an instant, but then it's daily action for the rest of your life.
Yes.
It's not a 90-day program. It's not a 21-day fix, and then we go back to eating Chick-fil-A. No, 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 no. You're a healthy person now. You make the choices of a healthy person. It's an identity shift.
Right. So you have this custom metabolism reset coaching. Is that your main program, Justin? I didn't see any other programs there on your website.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're coming to me for. So there's it's like medication, right? There's like pharmaceutical drugs that do specific things, and then there's off-label uses of these things,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
I
Yeah.
tend to have a lot of short form content around metabolic health because 88% of adults in America are suffering from clinical metabolic dysfunction. So one of the most important things I can do is help people heal that and touch the largest number of people that way. And then there is sort of the behind the scenes stuff that isn't marketed. Like King versus Prince, my masculinity training,
Yeah.
is usually very successful, very high net worth males who have reached the top of the mountain of money and said, why am I still not happy? Why am I so depressed? Why can't I hold a romantic relationship? What is going on? And I need to kind of coach them through the other 90% of life that they've neglected.
Yes.
And then I work with professional UFC fighters, like people who literally fight in a cage. There's a lot of different extremes of people that I'm working with. I work with influencers like yourself. If you said, hey, I want to create a funnel and I want to coach people and I want to make money through my social media channels, I can teach you how to build those business operations, which we can talk about the freedom question in a bit. But the reason why I do it this way is I believe like self-actualization for me is I don't actually believe in a work-life balance, because every dollar that comes to me right now is a direct result of my authentic self-expression. So if somebody wants their body to look like my body, I can teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
Well, you seem to be able to travel the world freely and you work remotely and you have these businesses and you have passive income. Okay, I can teach you how to do that, right? You seem to understand this duality versus non-duality. What's going on here? Can you teach me this stuff? Can you tell me what's in your brain? Yeah, 100%. So all I'm doing is just like I'm living life as me and constantly growing and learning. And I will share that with anybody who wants to come to me and learn those things.
Wow. The question that I had for you that came to mind before we met today is, what is the difference between the myth and the lie?
Ooh. Well, so myths, generally speaking, lies tend to be made for manipulation and seem to have a pretty negative connotation, where it's like, I don't think I can get somebody to do what I want them to do unless I convince them of something, because if I tell them the truth, they're not going to want to do the thing that I want to do.
Right.
Problem is, I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Chek and the Chek Institute, but I had a 2.5-hour conversation with him the other day that will be out soon about this. And we talked about the power of myth, because myth is now often weaponized, right? Like the story of Jesus, you can say this is literal. This was a literal human being that lived, or you can say this is mythology meant to teach us a lesson. But like I said, there are now 45,000 different denominations of Christianity. All think that they're correct, right? So the power of myth is very, very powerful. Myth is how we learn lessons. It's why the Greeks came up with all these different gods who could manipulate their environment. Well, Zeus, he can do this and he has a trident and it's all little allegories and myths for humans, right? If Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, command that mountain to move, it will move itself. They're telling stories of the human experience through mythology. So mythology can be really powerful for learning lessons and teaching and passing on wisdom from generation to generation, and usually starts altruistically, right?
Yes.
But myth can be weaponized, and lies, generally speaking, lies are almost always weaponized, unless you're talking about like, I lied to my girlfriend because there's a surprise birthday party for her that I don't want her to know about. There can be misdirection. But I think myth is usually told in an altruistic way to teach important lessons, where lie is usually used for outright deception.
Yes. So no pain, no gain. This is pretty obvious. Would you like to make a comment on this one too?
Yeah. Well, and again, it's subjective and it's individualized, right? I thoroughly enjoy lifting weights.
Yep.
I don't think I haven't gone more than 6 weeks in the last 20 years not lifting weights. And that was because I had surgery and couldn't, right? So for me, I've reached a place where like now my metabolism is functioning at an optimal level. I'm 38 years old. I'm healthier than I've ever been. So I can go to the gym and I know where my edge is of I'm doing an amount of resistance or a little bit of pain, let's say, that is beneficial for me on the back end. But I also know when to call it quits. Now, in my 20s, when I hated my body, I would regularly work out until I vomited. I have passed out in saunas. I was 160 pounds deadlifting 425 pounds. I was boxing, purple belt in jujitsu, just like constantly just beating up my body.
Right.
And I still now am rehabbing injuries from when I was 22 because I was so hell-bent on changing my body in this really difficult way. So what's really hard is all of the mainstream is still saying eat less, move more, eat less food, exercise more. But if we go to the person, like I said, 88% of the adult population has metabolic dysfunction. So if someone has that term sarcopenic obesity, low skeletal muscle mass, osteoporosis, we feed them a 1,200 calorie per day diet and have them go lift weights the way that I do, that's going to be very harmful for them.
Right.
But for me, at my current level of metabolic health, it's beneficial for me. Then if I took, LeBron James, like one of the greatest athletes alive, and I tried to do his workout, I'm going to hurt myself.
Right.
It's too much for me, right? So this is where we all come back to decisiveness, decision, and intuition. People are doing exercise routines that they were told to do because they quote unquote should, instead of feeling their way through what feels good. So generally speaking, in the beginning, when I'm removing poison from people's lives for the first 30 days, I'm just having them go for walks in the sunshine.
Mm.
And the spiritual piece of this is the pyramid, we say, of spirit. Think about how many times in spirituality you hear the word energy. We have energy centers, our chakras, we have an energy blockage, all of this. Now loop it back to what I told you about the blockage of energy production in the body at the level of the metabolism.
Yeah.
So all of this like esoteric thought and energy that we're putting into our thoughts and creation and the way that we feel our intuition and do somatic work and all of this, it's very hard to do this with a lack of energy. So that's where we have to start, and helping people see, if you only have 1,200 calories in the gas tank and you want your body to function optimally, and then you're going to go to the gym and do 3 hours of cardio, you're going to put your body in an energy crisis. So we just have to understand no pain, no gain. Like the idea of no pain, no gain is like a little bit of pain and discomfort can move you in the direction of your goals, but you have to be able to feel what is appropriate and what is harmful.
Yes, I love that piece, right? That's very unique. So we cannot say that's just no pain, no discomfort. We cannot really say that. Okay, thank you. Gosh, you're so wise in so many ways. So the other one it came from me in this myth. I don't know. This is what I tell my husband. I tell him, coconut sugar, it's better than processed white sugar. Is that true, Justin? He would love to know.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? So there are what are called micronutrients
Yeah.
that exist in coconut sugar that don't exist in pure refined cane sugar, right? So like if we have, if we take a bunch of table sugar and put it in water, and then we make a little sugar water and we measure the vitamins and minerals in that, we're not going to find much.
Right.
If we measure the vitamins and minerals in organic orange juice with the same sugar content, we're going to find a whole bunch of vitamins and minerals and things that are positive for our health and wellness, right? Now, the sugar piece, sugar over the last several decades has been heavily villainized as something that is bad for us.
Right.
If you go through the literature, I know a guy named Kyle Mamounis, he's a PhD, and he did his PhD dissertation on this. He searched high and low, up and down, all over the literature to find any study whatsoever that proves that sugar alone is harmful to human health, and it doesn't exist. So this is where we get stuck on reductionist science. We have all of these headlines that say sugar is bad, sugar does this, sugar does that, diabetes, blah, 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 blah. Then you look into it. Usually it's done in rodents, but sometimes it's done in humans as well. And you look up the makeup of the food, the chow, the rodent chow that they're feeding these rodents or what they're feeding to humans, and it always contains some amount of fat.
Right.
And that fat is polyunsaturated fats, which are the same types of fats that are found in seed oils like canola oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, which dramatically impact health in negative ways. So sugar is getting blamed for things that these unhealthy, unsaturated fats are doing in the body. They're causing instability in the metabolism. So sugar itself, I mean, every carbohydrate you eat eventually gets converted to glucose in the body.
Right.
Every single cell in the human body can burn glucose for fuel. It's the most important fuel source that we have, So sugar itself is not harmful. Now, if you just compare sugar to sugar, the coconut sugar does have more micronutrients, so probably more beneficial, but the white sugar is not harmful.
Yeah, so that's good to know. So you don't really talk about diets, right? The keto diet, just kind of having fat as a fuel, that. I used to do that. I tried that before. It just didn't work for me. Is that something that you have tried, or it's something that you recommend somehow? Not that would become a diet, but having more healthy fats in our diet. That's what I do now. Most of my diet's composed of healthy fats.
Yeah.
So is that, but I have a balance, of course. I love sweet potatoes, so I just kind of mix that too and all that stuff. I love carbohydrates in general, but nutritious ones. So yeah, talk to me about the keto diet. I know it's a diet, but what's the truth about it?
Well, this is part of where Clovis and my company comes from. So, as I told you, I had a successful music career, was doing well. My niece was born
Yeah.
terminally disabled. She was having over 300 seizures a day, and she was put into the pediatric ICU within 7 days of life. And they ran over $1 million in testing on her. They gave her less than 3 years to live. They installed a G tube, which is a feeding tube through her stomach. And there's a company called the Charlie Foundation, which specializes in the treatment of epilepsy in children, toddlers, teenagers. And that's what the ketogenic diet is used for medically. It's a medical diet to prevent seizures in epileptic patients. And that was my first intro to the ketogenic diet. And I stayed in nutritional ketosis by daily blood draw for 12 weeks. And I did 90 minutes of fasted cardio every day to learn how to make my metabolic flexibility improve so I could burn fat and burn glucose and all these things.
Yeah.
I think the ketogenic diet is an unbelievably powerful reset, if you will, if someone has a toxic diet. But it's not the removal of carbohydrates that's solving the problem. It's the removal of toxic junk. When you switch to the keto diet, all of a sudden you can't eat breakfast cereal and Pop-Tarts and pastries and bread and all this stuff. So all of the ultra processed stuff is kind of getting thrown out the window. I do think you can overdo fat. So if you have too much fat in the diet, like a lot of carnivore people run into this, you can cause physiological insulin resistance on a zero carbohydrate diet because glucose does not cause diabetes and insulin resistance.
Right.
So it can get a little bit out of hand. For generally speaking, 25 to 30% of your daily calories coming from healthy fats is a good place to land because all of your sex hormones, like testosterone, are synthesized from the dietary fat that you're ingesting. So fats are very important. But yeah, I tend to steer away from names of diets because I started with paleo. And then when Savannah was born, I learned about the ketogenic diet. I actually ended up inventing a baby formula for her in my kitchen, which is why I have the supplement companies now.
Yeah.
And then down the line, I got extreme and I became a carnivore. And I was carnivore for a year straight and destroyed my health. I messed up my thyroid function. My testosterone dropped to the 200s, which is like that of like a 75-year-old man. I'm 38 now. My testosterone's 850 naturally. And I eat probably 250 to 300 grams of carbs a day. So you do need to find the balance, but ultimately the best bang for your nutritional buck is food versus poison. If you just remove ultra processed junk food and do nothing else and never track anything, you're still going to see an improvement in your health.
Wow. How amazing, though. So people listening to this, they're like, we have to hire him. That's exactly what I love about this work that I'm doing now with the team of marketing of these messages, because we need to hear that. It's education. Most of us don't know these things.
Mhm.
Even I didn't know some of the things that you talked about. And I read a lot. I'm in touch with a lot of people. And you said a lot of things today that I was not aware of. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for being generous too, Justin. The last myth that I have here, I have lots of them. We won't go through all of them. But there's one that really caught my attention too. Somebody wrote, this is out there, that eating disorders and body image is something that only women have problems with, not men. What has been your experience when it comes to this myth?
There's a strange phenomenon where when men talk about male struggles, they seem to be upset about women's struggles, and when women's struggles are talking about their struggles, they tend to say that men have it easier. It becomes this contest back and forth, but like it's the same core issues, it's just manifesting differently. So like if you've ever been, you did fitness competitions, if you've ever been in a locker room full of male bodybuilders,
Yeah.
oh my, you've never seen such body dysmorphia and disordered eating and injecting testosterone and taking anabolic steroids and tren and destroying their bodies. And like you see these guys that are 8% body fat and they're like 200 testosterone. They're half dead. They get done with a fitness competition. They're dehydrated. They're throwing up. It's like, it's really gnarly, but they just are in pursuit of this body that's completely unnatural. They hate themselves when they don't have six-pack abs. I have seen a ton of eating disorders in men. And not just the eating disorders in men is what there's anorexia. And in the bodybuilding world, there's this sort of like slang term called big orexia, which is like men's muscles are never big enough. So they need more injections and they need more food and bulking and steroids and all the thing. I mean, I think we have an epidemic of eating disorders and body dysmorphia in men. And I know it because I lived it.
Yeah.
I was on stage 300 nights a year. I'm having my picture taken. There's a YouTube channel of me. People are looking at me as some kind of sex symbol. I'm getting hit on all the time. And I'm suffering. I'm putting in 2 hours of work a day, 6 days a week, trying to maintain my body fat. And, I just became this sort of object. I was like heavily objectified. And that's something that's not talked about enough either is, being in the music industry, there's a lot of abuse that goes on. I have had my shirt ripped off. I have had women shove their tongue in my mouth without my permission, grab my hair. Like it's crazy. I had security on stage for these reasons that were happening. So it's important, I think, for both genders, let's say, whatever category you fall into, to just say,
Yeah.
hey, listen, these are universal struggles. Universally, people are struggling with their body image, and the guy with the quote unquote dad bod is seeing all the fitness influencers on steroids with their six-pack abs, and he's feeling bad about himself, and he's probably under eating, or he's punishing himself in the gym. Or a guy like me gets on stage and somehow it's okay that I'm being sexually assaulted because I have muscles and can physically protect myself. It's still not okay. So it's like
Yes.
we're all in this same place, having this human experience and having these struggles. And it would be so much better if we could all just talk about it. Like, can men discuss their eating disorder with women? But then we fall into the masculine feminine dynamics where a lot of men were raised in a place where they weren't safe with the feminine, and a lot of feminine were raised in a way where they weren't safe with the masculine.
Right.
So we have these two camps. Like all the girlfriends, they talk to their other girlfriends about their eating disorder, and all the boys, they don't talk to anybody about their eating disorders because they're not allowed to have feelings and emotions. But to answer your question, I mean, it's an absolute myth that that's a female problem. That's a human problem.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that too.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I see. It's very clear to me. Well, it goes back to spirituality again, knowing what you are versus who you are. So the
Mhm.
more I get to know what I am, the less I know who I am. So
Yeah.
it's the identity. It's just so interesting to see that. So it goes back to spirituality. I have to say, Justin, that's my focus for some reason. It's spirituality. It's the
Mhm.
deeper I go with my practices, the more I can see what you see, with clarity. It's clarity
Mhm.
that arises, and it is a human thing. So we are causing so much unnecessary suffering because of the identification with the body mind.
Mhm.
Yes. So I want to mention your website, justinnault.com.
Mhm.
And is there anything else that I missed? I wanted to ask that question about freedom in a moment.
Mhm.
Are you planning to write a book? Have you written a book before that I'm not aware of?
I've not written a book. I've given it some thought, and it may happen in the future. No immediate plans, but
Yes. Okay. I had that question. I had to have that question here.
yeah,
And your services are offered online and offline, or only online or only in person?
both. I do both. I have some clients here. I live in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
If someone's local in Austin and wants to link up, then our client coach meetings would probably be in person. I like to do in person when I can, but most of what I do is digital because I have international clients.
Okay. So that's good to know as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
And before we say goodbye for today, is there anything that you left unsaid? Anything that it's called to be here in words?
Yeah, I think if this is resonating with you, don't let yourself talk yourself out of action. If you're magnetized to this conversation, whichever one of the two of us speaking right now you're more magnetized to, just reach out, take action, go watch a video.
Mm.
Right, I have justinnault.com/training. There's a free training video that talks about some of this stuff. justinnault.com/training. Just go watch that video. Don't let this be another podcast that you listen to and then you get busy and you got to go pick up the kids at school and you forget about it. If you got goosebumps at some point during this conversation, pay attention to that intuition.
Yes, 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 yeah. Gosh, I just, I love everything about it. You see, that's timeless wisdom. That's what I call it. It's something that will never go away, within the human experience,
Yeah,
while it's still called human.
sure.
And I think that this is probably the next step to the human evolution, right? What it means to be a human. So it's the integration of science, spirituality, practicality, just coming to be one with life, having that understanding. It really feels that way to me. That's the vision.
Yeah, that's why I call my work personal evolution coaching.
Yeah. So my last question to you is that freedom question. What is freedom to you? What is the concept of freedom all about?
Yeah, freedom to me is when your life is built on authentic self expression. And this is one of those moments where a lot of people hearing this are going to say, it must be nice. It must be easy for you to say all these things that I have this job, I have bills to pay. It's like, yeah, you take incremental steps in the direction that you want to go. So when you take a look at your life, take stock of your life and look at who is mostly in charge. If all of your money is coming from someone else, if the places you have to be are dictated by someone else, if the things you have to do are dictated by someone else,
Mm.
if you're really feeling crummy one day and you can't take a day for yourself because you don't have the freedom to do that, we have to sort of rework life. And I know how scary that is, right? When I left the music industry, I left 95% of my income and I walked away from it and I started from scratch. And I had a dream. I had the dream job that some people would have killed for,
Yeah.
and it wasn't serving me. So I walked away. I know it's big. I know it's scary, but you can start taking steps today to move in the direction of eventual freedom. And for me, the reason I'm here on this show with you is you felt called to have the consciousness experience that is me on your show because I'm expressing something authentically that you felt magnetized to.
Mm.
So if you think about it, I'm technically working right now, having this beautiful conversation with you. Like that's freedom to me. That's freedom.
Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. A trillion times. Yes, that's it. Thank you so much again, Justin, for your beautiful presence, your timeless wisdom, and for the work that you're doing. That is, it's really, well, it's a gift to humanity. It really is. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. This has been a pleasure.
So take good care of your beautiful self for now, and we'll talk soon. We'll be in touch again. Bye for
Great.
now.